Hey, Zachary, how's it going today?
Doing great, Sandy. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to speak with
Oh,
you.
same here. And thank you so much for your service. I love speaking with former military and your Marines, which I know are the best, right?
Don't forget it. Don't let any soldiers or sailors tell you differently.
I've talked to enough people in my life that it's no Marines, number one. But you kind of are the badasses, I think. So
Well, you certainly have it the hardest. I can tell you that much without question.
that's what I'm talking about. It seems like you do have it the hardest. So you have a very interesting story. So let's just start with that because I love to hear people's story and how they got to where they are today. So tell me your story.
Certainly. So, I was very fortunate. I had a wonderful family growing up, lived in a great upper class neighborhood, parents that took care of virtually everything for me. The challenge was I had very significant learning disabilities growing up, severe ADHD, dyslexia. Went to like seven different schools from kindergarten through my senior year of high school.
Wow.
And I was constantly being told by my teachers and everyone there that you're not going to amount to anything, you're a failure, things aren't going to work out for you. And my parents always gave me the opportunity to excel, even though it was difficult for me to excel. What I learned early on, though, is the more people told me I wasn't going to be successful, the more people told me that I was stupid and I couldn't make things work the way that I should make them work, the more it empowered me to think, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. That actually created the success that I have today. And it's funny because ADHD is considered a disability, but it's called multitasking when you get out of school. And then all of a sudden, this guy's an energetic multitasker. He can organize this, he can organize that. At a very early age, I had a deep love and appreciation and patriotism to our country, but really the Marine Corps. I don't know why, because no one in my family had ever been in the military, let alone the Marines of all things. And when I turned 18, I ended up down on the Parris Island, South Carolina, at Marine boot camp. 16 of the most difficult weeks anybody can imagine. And what was interesting was the kids that had a really hard life. We're talking coal mines of West Virginia, projects of Philadelphia, slums in New Orleans. They flourished at boot camp because they got 3 meals a day and a nice, comfortable bed, and nobody was trying to kill them or anything. Well, kind of kill them. I mean, not totally kill them. I mean, the drill instructors are pretty tough.
Not intentionally trying to kill him.
Not intentionally, right? Metaphorically. I really struggle because literally when I say this, my mom laid my clothes out for me my senior year of high school on the bottom of my bed. I never really had to work for anything. My parents provided a lot of stuff. And now all of a sudden I'm being challenged to a level that I can't even imagine. And that's where I learned this whole warrior's journey that we'll talk about here in a second. I left the Marine Corps in the late 90s. 2 years later, September 11th happened. I was just riddled with all this guilt that I had left my brothers and sisters, and now they're taking the fight to the enemy, and I'm not with them. And the reason I left the Marine Corps is because I wanted to get deployed. I wanted to go fight and kill for my country, and I never got the opportunity to. So I did the next best thing, which is joined our local volunteer fire department. Now, at the time, my full-time job was at Eli Lilly and Company, big pharmaceutical company. I learned a lot about building billion-dollar brands and how to solve a solution, not try to sell features and benefits. And early on, I got lost in a fire, and it was horrifying right when I started in the fire service. And I thought, okay, this is a problem. Guys getting lost in the fire. I remember talking to my captain when I got out, and he's like making fun of me. And he's like, look, this happens to everybody. You just have to get used to that. And I'm thinking like, no, that doesn't make sense. We should find something to fix this problem.
Okay.
So I came
Hold on one.
glow in the dark.
Okay, hold on a second. What do you mean you got lost in the fire? Because I don't know what you're talking about. What does that mean?
Right.
Elaborate a
So,
little bit more on that, because I know where you're getting,
yeah,
where you're
so
going. But
there's a couple different jobs you have once you go into a burning building on the fire department.
okay,
I was on a search and rescue team, and one of the things we do is we go ahead of the engine that has the hose. They put the wet stuff on the red stuff and get the fire out. The truck company's job is to open up the walls and the ceilings so we can get ventilation and also get to the fire that's made behind the wall. And my job was to go in there real fast and search for victims or the source of the fire. I was working my way down the hallway, assuming that once I got to the end of the hallway, there'd be a staircase or a door. And you can't see anything. And when I say it's not like getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom where you can see a little, nightlight. You put your hand this far in front of your face, you can't even see your fingers.
Wow.
You got 80 pounds of gear. You're your dexterity is almost at zero. You've got these big bulky gloves and a face mask on. And as I got to the end of the hallway, there was no door there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm actually in a walk-in closet and I have no idea how to get out of here. Meanwhile, I look down at my air temperature or my air gauge and I'm down to 20 minutes of air. And, nobody dies in fire from the fire. That's a myth. You die from the smoke and the toxic chemicals. The second that black smoke touches your lung, it's instant cardiac arrest. And within 20 minutes, if I couldn't find my way out, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now.
Right. Wow. Okay, so you get lost in the fire, and you were talking to your commander, and he's like, oh, it happens all the time.
And it does. And I'm like, no, we can do better. And I remembered when I was in the Marine Corps Infantry, on the back of our helmets, we had these two little glow-in-the-dark tabs. And that way we could keep track of each other. And I remember doing some research. I'm not that smart of a guy, but I know smart people. And I remember working at Eli Lilly, talking to the scientists, brilliant people. And so what I did was I wanted to find a way to make that glow-in-the-dark material glow brighter and longer. And so I got some really brilliant physicists and developers. And we kept working on projects after project. And we finally came up with this product that glowed so bright, it was like a flashlight. And it would glow for a dozen plus hours.
Wow.
I make a product out of it, put it on my helmet, go into a fire a couple months later. All of a sudden, everyone goes, hey, where'd you get that? I'm like, well, I made them. So I make a couple more. And over the next 6 months, I made about $5,000 selling this out of the trunk of my car. What I would do is I'd drive to a fire station, like, maybe one in Northern Virginia or something. I'd say, hey, I'm a firefighter from Cincinnati. Can we go in the bathroom and turn the lights off together? And if they didn't beat me up, they usually said, oh, that's pretty cool. Because that's where I could get them in that dark area where they couldn't see anything, because there's usually not windows in bathrooms. And I would talk about the problem of being disoriented. And they all got lost just like I did. Then I'd pull out this glow-in-the-dark material and say, now, look, this can solve your problem. So 6 months goes by. I'm making a couple bucks, just enough to be a hobby. I go to this big trade show. In 3 days at the trade show, we book $100,000 in business.
Wow.
Now, the problem was I had no money to buy all the raw materials to fill those orders. I had nobody that could produce them. I had no way to ship them. And people are like, you got to stop taking orders. And I'm like, no, I'm a Marine. We accomplish the mission always, no matter what. I'll figure it out. And what you find with entrepreneurship is most people aren't willing to make the sacrifices that you need to make to be successful. One of those first sacrifices was I refinanced my home. I maxed out my credit cards. I started draining my 401k to fill those orders. And over the next 10 years, I grew it into about a $30 million total revenue company. That's the good news. The bad news is there was a lot of peaks and a lot more valleys than peaks along the way. And that's where I really developed the warrior's journey and really went into the book Warrior Entrepreneur that I ultimately came out with a few months ago.
Wow. That's really, yes. I mean, it's amazing what you did. And I've been there before starting companies, and it takes a lot of backbone, resilience just to keep it going and to keep it going. So that's really amazing. So you still have the company now?
Yes. Yep. The company is still rocking and rolling. I've been very fortunate to hire a great executive team, including a CEO, so I can be more in a supportive role now rather than being responsible for the day-to-day. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs fail to do. I realized the company had grown bigger than me.
Yeah.
And I was actually holding the company back. And when I was able to bring on a CEO and focus on being more of a founder and a visionary, the company really started to take off from there.
Well, kudos to you, because not a lot of people will get to that point where they realize that. But that's how the big companies are built. You had the vision. Now find people smarter than you to take it to the next level, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's the skill set of starting a company is so drastically different than the skill set of running a company. When you start a company, you got to focus on intangibles. You got to focus on selling them this pig with lipstick on it, and tell them it's not really a pig. When you're a CEO, it's all about detail and focus and cash management and HR and those type of things. And those are all things that I neglected. And that's really how I learned this warrior journey. I'd love to kind of share some examples of how that came together.
Yes, yes. So you have your recent book, The Warrior Entrepreneur, right? That's the correct title?
Yep. And so I wanted to write an autobiography, and my editor's like, look, other than your wife and your mom, nobody wants to read your autobiography, unless your name's Donald Trump or Beyonce or something like that. His comment to me was, what were the lessons you learned along the way, and then how can you incorporate your experience into that? And that's really what happened with the book.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some of those experiences. That sounds great.
So when you look at the warrior's journey, this goes all the way back to Homer and the Iliad and Odysseus and Greek tragedy. And it starts with a hero that is challenged, that struggles, that has a problem. And as they learn from those struggles and challenge, they get stronger. Iron sharpens iron, goes all the way back to biblical time. Talking about all these things that we can do to become stronger and develop that rhino skin, if you will, the calluses. But at some point in time in that warrior's journey, you're going to have this crucible. And the crucible is this major catastrophe, this crisis in your life. Now, it could be death of a loved one. It could be a divorce. It could be a drug or alcohol problem. In my case, it was my business was running out of money. We were failing. And in that crucible, a couple things happen. Number one, the abyss comes to life. The abyss is that dark hole that the philosopher Nietzsche talked about, said if you stare long enough into the abyss will eventually stare back. And what he meant is that it will consume you. And what happens is you see people that are in abusive relationships or they can't get away from the bottle. And the longer they're there, the harder it is to get out. That's the abyss. It's pulling them farther and farther and deeper into that abyss. Now, you have to honor the abyss and respect the abyss, but not spend too much time. And the way I mean that is if you're walking your dog down the street and there's this big semi-truck that's coming next to you, you know that semi-truck will splatter you and you'll be dead before you know what happened. But don't spend too much time on it. Just focus on staying on the sidewalk and recognize that things are really bad if you go over here and take a step this way. Same thing in that crucible. Now, to get through the crucible, there's two things you have to do. You have to transform and you have to change and conquer your crucible. Now, the transform and change part is if you keep doing the things that you did before, you're going to get right back to where you were. The conquering is you can't just simply survive your crucible. You have to destroy what got you to that. And that destruction could be all that negative talk that happened when you were younger, when people told you in school you weren't going to make it, or it could be this bad relationship you had where someone said you're ugly and you're not good. And you just got to be able to unpack those bad things there and recognize them and kill them.
Right.
The transformation is what happened. So my crucible happened about 7 years into the business. I get a phone call from my CFO. I'd just taken vacation. I hadn't spent a lot of time with my family. I was going to check out. No emails, no text messages, nothing. Well, you know how well that works when you own a business. Yeah. So I said, whatever you do, don't call me unless there's an emergency. Well, guess what? 3 days later, he calls me up and says, we got problems. The big customer didn't pay us on time. We had to pay a bunch of extra things that we didn't realize, and we can't make payroll coming up. And you got to prepare yourself for liquidation and ultimately bankruptcy of the company. Well, I fall to my knees, and I have what I thought was a heart attack. I could feel my chest burning. I could feel electrical currents going down my arm. Everything they taught us in the fire department, that these are signs of the big one, get them to a hospital immediately. And I realized it was actually more of a panic attack than a heart attack after my wife started talking to me. She's a doctor. She was there like, look, you just, the stress is killing me. I mean, literally killing me.
Right.
So that was my abyss. That was the bottom. And the transformation that I made was, and the conquering is, first of all, I fired almost all of my executive staff. I brought in a new CEO. I stepped down and resigned as CEO and said, something needs to change. Now, had that abyss and that crisis not been there, I don't know if I would have made that decision. When you're in a crisis, all options are open, including really, really bad options like suicide or doing something like that, because you would never think about that unless you're in the crisis. And that's where you got to be real careful when you get to that point to make sure you take that right decision and journey. And the way you do that is through the training and the hardship that happened before you got to that point.
So what advice do you offer any entrepreneur that gets into that situation?
So the first advice I give you is it's really, really tough, and you can't underestimate that toughness. The words you used earlier are absolutely 100% spot on. Grit is the word I love a lot. Perseverance, tenacity. A thing we need to really think about, and we haven't done this a lot lately, is serenity and compassion and having that outlet, because we know about PTSD in the military. We know that the numbers are off the charts. But what people don't understand is 70% of all entrepreneurs have experienced depression to the point where they've considered themselves to have a mental illness. 70%.
That's
and it's
astounding.
lonely because we're usually, just onesies and twosies that are out there. And you can't talk to your employees. Sometimes you can't talk to your family about it. So making sure you're mentally strong enough to handle this journey is the first one. 2, embracing the risk that goes along with it. The famous quote that I'm sure I'll butcher is, entrepreneurs live a few years of their life like most people could never imagine, so they can live the rest of their life like most people never could. You have to put that in and recognize the odds are pretty high that you're going to fail. And that's okay, because in that failure, you're going to learn what to do next time.
Yeah.
The only way you can truly fail is to completely give up and never throw your hat back in the ring again.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. So what else does your book offer entrepreneurs?
So the book is really divided into 3 categories.
Okay.
The first category is the science of adversity. I really get into the neurobiology of what fight and flight is. It's called the sympathetic and parasympathetic system.
Right.
These are the part of your brain that you can't control. So a lion comes at you, or you walk into a business meeting and realize that your laptop just crashed and you don't have the presentation you've been working on for 3 or 4 months. If you can start to harness that process, because your body's going to release adrenaline, cortisol, all these chemicals, and it can make you not think clearly. But you can harness that to your benefit if you're a warrior. The example I give to everyone is, if you've ever been in a car accident, everyone tells you the second before impact, everything slows down like a movie, like slow motion. Right. And what the reason is your body has flooded your brain with all these chemicals and oxygen to say something really bad is getting ready to happen. Let's try to absorb it. It's a superpower. It's incredible. Imagine if you could harness that power to slow down time. The guy that's shooting free throws at the free throw line, and the place is screaming and yelling, and he talks about, I can just zone out and have nothing. So that's one of the things you learn about in this book, or how to recognize those triggers and how to focus on the fight rather than the flight.
Right.
The second part of the book is I go through a series of chapters talking from serenity and teamwork and courage and purpose. And I give these really great stories ranging from entrepreneurs like Momofuku Ando, who invented the ramen noodles, to Walt Disney, to Elon Musk, to Kate Spade, who wasn't able to get through her crucible and spent too much time in that abyss of those issues. Yeah. And you talk to her friends and family, and they talk about this has been a struggle she's had for years. She spent too much time in that. It didn't get the right help that she needed, and ultimately took her life.
Right.
I talk about the ancient Spartans. I talk about the samurai. The samurai spent just as much time on sword fighting as they did on poetry and calligraphy and the tea ceremony.
Wow.
And the reason why is the more they could learn other experiences outside of killing people, the more that's going to make them creative and be able to handle other things. And when they're in a combat, their brain is operating on such a different level than most other people are. They're going to be able to see different parts of the battle and protecting their charges different than other people will.
Wow.
And so the book, again, just a great book. It's a book you can certainly sit down. I've talked to many people that have read it, nonstop in 2 days. But I also want it to be a guidebook that if you just need a little help and you just want to focus on this one chapter, you can read some stories and find inspiration from those stories and those chapters.
Wow. Now, you said there was 3 parts. You talked about the first 2. What's the third part?
Yeah. So the third part is my story.
Okay.
That I weave in and out through that. So as I start the book off, I almost died of COVID a year ago.
Oh my gosh.
Spent 2 weeks in the ICU. I stopped breathing, had a real near-death experience.
Oh my gosh.
That was a real abyss. Like, I can't tell you how close I was to that abyss of death. And the experience that I learned from that and the training that I had to help prepare me to get through that and not give up. I talk about my story of, adversity and what I had to go through in the Marine Corps and how I specifically learned things. One of the things that's so pushed on in all branches of the military, especially the Marine Corps, is teamwork. Mm-hmm. And there was one time when we were marching in formation, 60 of us, and all 59 of them go one way, and I go the wrong way. And I collapse, what's called collapsing the formation, because everyone starts running into them because I turned left instead of right. Well, you know what the drill instructor did to me? He didn't punish me. He took the whole platoon. We have this thing called the sandbox, which is basically a sandbox that you do high-intensity calisthenics, push-ups, bends and thrusts, burpees, jumping jacks, over and over. You're covered in sweat and blood because the guy's kicking you in front of you because it's too small for all of you to get in there. He stands me in the front of the platoon and makes the whole platoon do punishment. And every time they do a punishment, they have to say my name over and over again. So what they're doing is they let me down and I let them down, and they were showing that by, and you can imagine the guys the rest of the day weren't real happy.
Yeah.
I slept with one eye open that night in the squad bay because I didn't know what they were going to do to me. But that's part of teamwork, and those are the lessons that I kind of share and pull through all that.
That sounds amazing. And I understand it was a best-selling book on Amazon and also in several countries.
Yeah, the first couple of weeks, it really took off great and had a lot of people that said, okay, what's next? I don't think I can go through writing another book again, but what I am doing now is creating some really exciting online training. Now, this is not going to be your run-of-the-mill online training like you typically see with a couple PowerPoints and videos. I'm going to literally create a board game. Think of it as like Chutes and Ladders, where you go down this journey, and each step along the way, you're going to earn certain patches, like in the Boy Scouts. And once you get a certain number of patches, that unlocks this other part of the journey. And that journey is going to take you through. It's obviously going to be mostly focused on entrepreneurship and business startup, but anybody can take this course that just wants to get personal development. And as you start to learn about grit and tenacity, and you hear stories and examples, then eventually we'll go down and you can choose, okay, well, I want to start my own business. So how do I write a business plan? How do I pitch to investors? Or, hey, I've already got a business, but I want to scale to the next level. Or, hey, I need help with sales and marketing. And it's all going to be built off of that warrior foundation and these different pathways you can take within that training.
I love it. And that, oh my gosh, there's so many ways and avenues you can go with that. That sounds incredible. Wow. Well, you are doing so many amazing things, Zach, and I'm so happy for you. So is there anything else that you want to share with the audience?
No, I mean, I love it when people reach out. My email is always the best way, ZacharyLGreen@gmail.com. LinkedIn is also another great way to connect with me. And then my website is warriorentrepreneur.book.com. If they use the coupon podcast 2021, they can get 50% off on the book, both hardbound and paper copy. I'm more than happy to sign a book for you too when I send it out. And obviously there's a contact us section on the bottom. I really would appreciate if people would fill that out, reach out to me. And when I launch this online warrior training system, I'll be able to share that information with the people that sign up.
Nice. Wow. I love that. I'll make sure that's all in the show notes. And thank you so much, Zach. It's been such an honor. And thank you again for your service. And what a great product you created that I'm sure is going to save so many people's lives. These firefighters are definitely our unsung heroes in the world, for sure.
Sandy, thank you for your support and everything you're doing out there too.
All right. Take care.